Welcome back, guys. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. If you like this video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already. So this video is going to be essentially just a kind of an update video that I tend to do every month now of the kind of purchases that I've made, Blu-rays, 4Ks. And this one's a little bit different in the sense that it's covering all of October and, of course, because this video is coming out in mid-November, a few cheeky purchases from November. Well, actually, they were pre-orders and they've only just come out. So technically they're October purchases, or maybe even going back as far as September, actually. So yeah, let's get straight into it. Not as many this month. I've been a bit more sensible this month, so a bit more selective on my purchases. In fact, these aren't even all of them. I've just kind of picked out what I think are some of the more interesting ones. But there's been a lot of sales this month. So for us collectors, you know, there's been the kind of, I mean, currently there's the Criterion sale still going on. We've had the Arrow sale, the Indicator sale. We've had, obviously Halloween, there's a lot of kind of horror themed sales as well, right? So there's been a lot of sales going on. So it's a very expensive month, October, going into November for us collectors. But yeah, so speaking of which, the first actual thing I want to show you is I bought one thing in the Arrow sale, just one. Not because I dislike Arrow or anything. Again, I've got to be selective with my purchases. I can't afford to spend hundreds of pounds each month on these things. Just some months. No. So I found this actually when I was in London. And I kind of looked in a HMV, and there was a physical copy of this film still with the booklet. So I was like £8 because it was the Arrow sale. I thought it was a steal. And it's Yasuzo Masamura's Red Angel. Japanese film, of course, directed by Yasuzo Masamura. This is the first film of his I ever saw. God, well over 10 years ago now. And I actually had to get it by virtue of a Region 1 DVD because none of Masamura's films were available, I believe, back then. Certainly Red Angel wasn't. That was the one I was most interested in seeing. Which is kind of like, this is a kind of pretty, well, a lot of Masamura's films are kind of very distinct and singular. A film of his, for example, I watched recently was Blind Beast, which Arrow's also released. And they're kind of like chamber pieces, kind of really confined to like one location and dealing intensely with one subject, namely kind of transgressive subjects, right? So this film's kind of about war surgeons, essentially. And it really, there's kind of two major locations in this film. It's kind of the battlefields, which are kind of like a dreamlike abstract space. These kind of eerie, horrific battlefield sequences that you get, coupled with the scenes in the hospital for the soldiers, the wounded soldiers. And so it's set kind of during World War II. And it's just a very, very evocative film. Like I say, a very kind of powerful, singular film by Masamura that kind of teeters on the edge of dreamlike and surreal, and like I say, it's somewhat transgressive. But I've only seen the film once. I long got rid of my DVD, so I've got the Blu-ray here. Like I said, it comes with a booklet, so I had to pick this up. And yeah, I'm looking forward to rewatching it again. I haven't seen too many Masamura films. Some people really hail him as like one of the forgotten masters of Japanese cinema, particularly from the 60s. But from what I've seen of his, he's a kind of I think a kind of somewhat of an austere, demanding director in some regards as well. But like I say, but also kind of verges on that kind of the exploitation territory of Japanese cinema as well. So he kind of straddles those two lines, I think. But worth a watch if you haven't seen Red Angel, for sure. Like I said, I've only seen it once and it's kind of left quite an impression on me, so I look forward to watching it again. The next film is an Arrow release, and this is a new release by Arrow that sold out so quickly. I was very surprised how quick this sold out, and by me saying that, you might already have guessed what this is. And that is The Exorcist 2, The Heretic, directed by John Borman, of course, Deliverance, Point Blank, Hope and Glory fame. Excalibur as well. But this is a film that's kind of like a universally panned by critics and fans alike, but it does have the odd kind of super fan, the odd person that will stand up for it and say, I certainly know one person who thinks this is the best of all the Exorcist films. So I've never seen it, and it's kind of like these singular voices out there kind of going, you know, I actually think this is really good and a misunderstood classic. That's made me kind of finally take the dip on this, because those of you that have seen my videos before, I don't stray too far from kind of horror, the originals when it comes to classics, because more often than not, right, horror sequels kind of suck. That is the kind of rule, right? There are exceptions, of course, that even I've seen, but yeah, this limited edition sold out really, really quick. It's a 2-disc version that has essentially the original premiere version on disc 1, and then it has the international version on disc 2. No idea what the differences are. I'm very much looking forward to this. I kind of want to do a kind of a John Borman completionist run this year, because I'm aware John Borman's still alive and he's in his 90s. So, you know, he's getting on in age, and there's a couple of his films I haven't seen, like this being one of them. So I do want to kind of do a completionist run. I assume this has a limited edition booklet as well. Yeah, it's got a collector's booklet as well. So the original premiere version is about 15 minutes longer than the international version, which is interesting. So obviously I assume it had a disastrous premiere and they cut those out. That seems to be what it seems to be the impression anyway. Like I said, I don't know much about this film. I just know that it really, really varies from the original film. And I suppose it wasn't to people's taste. They wanted more of the same of the original Exorcist. Got a score by Ennio Morricone as well, which is that's always a plus, right? But yeah, this sold out within days of release, and again, when I was in London, I even tried looking for a physical copy of this. Couldn't find one at all. So I managed to get a copy, thankfully. But yeah, intrigued to watch this. It's kind of like almost not a direct follow-up, right? But it does have, yeah, Linda Blair is still in this, right? As a teenager, well, as a kind of young woman, late teenage years, right? It's been okay, so it's set 4 years after, yeah. So do look forward to watching this. Again, I didn't get this in time for Halloween, so I would have watched this in October otherwise, but oh well, I'll just watch it in November instead, I suppose. Nothing wrong with that. The next one is a new release by Radiance Films, which of course is a label, an exciting new label that launched, was it last year or has it already been 2 years? Can't remember. Maybe it was last year. Maybe it already has been 2 years. And they, you know, I've got a few of their releases already. They're kind of really exciting new label, like I say. And they kind of do these obscure, forgotten classics, really, that kind of haven't been picked up by any other label. And some of them are kind of really surprising that they haven't been picked up. And so I became a fan of them immediately, because that's kind of like my gig, really. That's kind of one of my interests in later years, is finding these kind of hidden gems, these obscure classics. And this film, true to their form, is, well, this is one I'd never heard of even. And it piqued my interest straight away, which is Panic in the Year Zero. 60s sci-fi film that actually, when you read the kind of blurb, you would be convinced it was made in the 50s. Sounds like a 50s sci-fi. It was made in 1962, starring Ray Milland, who also was the director. Didn't even realise Ray Milland had directed a feature film before, but Panic in the Year Zero he did. This has got an appreciation on here by Joe Dante, which, for those of you that know, Joe Dante is kind of a director who, you know, obviously did Gremlins, is probably his most famous thing, but kind of does these kind of politically subversive themes in a lot of his films. So the fact he recommends this and has an appraisal of here on this film suggests this might have a kind of real nice political slant to it. And judging by the blurb, I think it does. It's basically a kind of nuclear apocalypse film about a guy that, excuse me, that takes his family on holiday, and then all of a sudden kind of nuclear war breaks out, and essentially society, well, just breaks down, essentially. So, yeah, it has to, yeah, do whatever it takes to survive. So basically, it sounds like a kind of sci-fi thriller. Again, 1962. Really excited to watch this. And yeah, it's got some audio commentaries and interviews. But like I said, I've never heard of this. Maybe it's just a real gap in my knowledge. But apparently, yeah, described as one of the most expressive on-the-ground nightmare of the Cold War era, by Village Voice. So maybe it's a hidden gem. Who knows? Okay, so this was a sale item, and now we're moving on to 4Ks. So this I picked up just because it was on offer, and well, I'll show you what it is first. So it's the, Warner Brothers have released this kind of series of boxes to celebrate their 100-year anniversary as a studio, 100 years of Warner Brothers, and they've done these series of 5 film collections, and I went for this one, which is the classics one. So this is kind of the classic Hollywood collection, 5 films in between the 30s and the late 50s. And this is the only one I do intend to get. It was £35, so it was a kind of steal really, because if you think about it, even if you get a 3 for 30 4K deal, which is kind of the best you're going to get, and that's rare these days, this would amount to 50 quid. Even that's a good price. So 35 for 5 films, none of which I already own in 4K. In fact, I don't own any of these at all now. So you got The Wizard of Oz, Citizen Kane, Casablanca, Singing in the Rain, and Rebel Without a Cause. So again, the only reason I intend on getting this one actually is because all 5 of these films I think are really good selections, and they're classics. So, and like I said, I don't own any of them, so I thought, why not? So I've also got surprisingly over 45 hours of extras. You usually find in compilation box sets, the extras are kind of slimmed down and there's not much to them, but it's cool they got a lot of extras. I like the kind of gold design of the box set actually. It's nice, and the Warner Brothers logo kind of stands out and sticks out, so that's really cool. But they've done other ones, like they've done like a New Hollywood box set, which I actually really don't like because they include films like The Lost Boys, which is from the late 80s. That's not New Hollywood. New Hollywood at a push ended kind of like 81, really. That's kind of 80s commercial cinema. It should belong in a completely different box set, for example. And then they've done like a 2000s blockbusters one, I think it's called, but some of them aren't blockbusters. And the one of the films in there is Elvis, Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, which came out a few years ago, which I think doesn't really sit well with the rest of the films. I'm not interested in owning it, so this is the only one where like I kind of agree with all 5 of the films. And that's the problem I found with a lot of these box sets, is if you already own one, why own the box set? Unless, of course, annoyingly, you can't get one of the films that's in the box set anywhere else, which can happen sometimes, like I say, annoyingly. But I look forward to watching these in 4K, of course. Right, so these are 2 limited edition Steelbooks, 4K, just out, released. In fact, I just got them today, which is why I'm making this video for you guys. The first one, these were day 1 purchases for me because I love the films so much. And the first is, and I still think it is, Danny Boyle's best film that I've seen, is, of course, the second film that he made, Trainspotting, from 1996. British classic, right? Scottish, but British classic. Again, the story of Renton, played by Ewan McGregor, the kind of real star-making performance of Ewan McGregor's career. And I still think probably his best performance. It's one of those kind of movies that just where everything gels and clicks, really. I think it's a great time capsule of a movie that is of its time, but it's aged really well, if that makes sense. I think it has a lot of things to say about modern society. I think it's a very politically on-point movie, actually. It's a great Scottish movie, actually. I think it has a lot of things to say about Scotland. And it's if you compare, and like, there's a bit in the movie where Renton finally actually kind of manages to escape Scotland, if you like, and kind of he goes to live in London for a bit. And if you like compare and contrast the kind of the formal approach of what the film's doing there with how it depicts London to how it depicts Scotland, it's kind of making some interesting points there. But like I say, wonderful time capsule of a movie, great energy, and a movie that actually dares to say or try to attempt to explain why people do drugs in the first place. There's that great line by Rent in this movie where he kind of says, we're not stupid, or at least we're not that fucking stupid, which that's a lot more daring than say, I always point people to this movie if they haven't seen it, but they really like Requiem for a Dream, Requiem for a Dream is a film I really don't like because I think it's actually a film that kind of just hammers home the simple-minded message of drugs are bad, drugs are bad, drugs are bad, drugs are bad, over and over again, relentlessly for 2 hours. And I think that's a film that's actually aged terribly. Whereas Trainspotting, kind of ironically more responsibly, actually tries to it shows why people get into drugs when and how they do. Also shows the misery that it can cause, but it's way more honest and sobering. I think. I think it's a brilliant film, and very, very funny as well. The next film, wow, this is one of my favourite films. Still one of my favourite films ever made. It's an absolute classic. I had to get it, even though the recent 4K releases by the same director have been much derided and very much not liked at all. I'm talking, of course, about James Cameron and his film The Terminator. Second film he ever made. I think his greatest work, to be completely honest. But then again, I'm saying that because I think The Terminator... I still think in some ways The Terminator is kind of underrated, actually. I severely disagree with anyone that thinks Terminator 2 is better. It's not. This is the masterpiece right here. What an incredible film. I can't wait to watch this in 4K. I really can't. I hope. I think it. It's not as bad as the restorations and transfers of Aliens. And some people like them. It's been really, like I say, it's been quite divisive. But The Terminator is just an absolute classic. Arnie's greatest role, Arnie's greatest film, James Cameron's greatest film. One of the great genre movies of all time. The reason why The Terminator, right? I'll try and explain very, very quickly why I think The Terminator is great. Is because it manages to seamlessly balance and blend about 5 different genres effortlessly, brilliantly, right? Because if someone hadn't, for some reason, hadn't seen this film or hadn't even heard of it, right? And a lot of people, I think, have misconceptions about the first Terminator because of what kind of different kind of beast this franchise has become. We've had, 5, 6 movies now? I really only count the first 2. Although I think Terminator 3 maybe is a little bit underrated now. Or maybe I'm just thinking that relative compared to how awful the other sequels have been. That happens, doesn't it? Let's be honest. But I try and explain to someone who doesn't actually know anything about the Terminator. I say, well, the Terminator is kind of like, it's a romance, it's a sci-fi film, it's a thriller, it's an action movie, it's also a kind of horror. It's all of those things. Sometimes all at once. That's very hard to do. This film does it, like I say, as easy as breathing. I mean, it is a brilliant film. One of my most rewatched films ever. And I like the Steelbook, actually. I say I like this. I mean, you can't make it out here, but you've got Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor in the corner there, kind of like running away from the Terminator, which is really cool. But I'm usually not a fan of it, because to me, technically, that's like spoilers, right, on the cover. But again, it's so iconic now. It's kind of one of those, well, what can you do? But yeah, obviously that would have been a surprise for audiences back in 1984 to see that design, because you would have just had Arnie and then the revelation that that's what's underneath. It's kind of it towards the end of the film, but which is, like I say, easy to forget now. But I think this is a masterpiece. Love this film. Again, people, it's very easy to mock the effects now. I love them still. I think they're brilliant. I think they're just, again, an incredibly resourceful film. Ridley Scott once said about low-budget movie making, he said, when you tend to have less resources, you tend to use your head more. And he should know. His films have got less interested the more his budgets have swollen, in my opinion. But I think it's the case. This is a great example of that. So, yeah, fantastic film. What more can I say? That's it for this haul this month. I'm sure that I don't think there'll be another one next month, because December is pocket pinching time, so for Christmas and everything. So probably won't be one then. Might be one in January. Who knows? But yeah, as always, if you like the video, like I say, please do contribute to the discussion, be part of it, comment and subscribe. Do you like the purchases? Do you approve of them? What do you think? What do you think of the films? And as always, I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.